is that, while I'm out there serving as a law enforcement officer and I'm dealing with all this other stuff, was I lonely? Yeah, there were times I was lonely. But again, most of this boils back down to I was the common denominator in all the problems in my life. I can't change what happened to me as a child, as a teenager. I can change how I respond. And my nemesis, my typical go-to is getting quiet or isolating. And we had this phrase when I was a negotiator in law enforcement. If they're talking, as long as they're talking, they're not harming themselves or someone else. So keep them talking. And I think the same concept applies to our walks, especially within the body of Christ and law enforcement as well. And really for anybody is as long as we have people that are willing to talk, then that's progress. And we can kind of work with that. But when we isolate and shut down and there's no communication, especially in prayer, that's where the real damage is done.
Can you share your story with the audience?
My story doesn't start as an award-winning author or a internationally known keynote speaker, which I like to sum all that up as just I'm a brother, I'm a servant, that's it. But my story began when my parents divorced and I was a little boy. And after that happened, I was left with a neighbor as a babysitter. And that's the first time I was the kindest term I could use here is sexually abused. And I won't go into all the details. And then again as a teenager in church, again at 15. And then that ended when I was about 16. And so without going into all the details, I'll tell you that my perspective of God, of church leadership, of love, of relationships, of sex, of any form of intimacy whatsoever was greatly flawed. And my ability to communicate, to trust, to navigate conflict was deeply, deeply impacted. My sense of identity, purpose, all really jacked up. And then I met this beautiful, beautiful young woman in high school. We were friends long before we were married, but we met and became really good friends towards the beginning of our senior year of high school, and then started dating in February of 2000. We graduated high school in May of 2000, and we got married in September of 2000, and that's been almost 26 years. And our youngest child just graduated from high school and community college. We have 3 incredible young adult children, but that's where it began. But for the first year, I packed my bags every week because anytime there's conflict or disagreement or whatever you want to call it, I felt like what I'm supposed to do is run. And I wasn't a man. And, I don't regret marrying her at 18 at all. I regret not giving her a healthy man, a whole man. And hopefully I'm moving closer to that every day, man she deserves. And so I got in law enforcement in 2009. I'm fast forwarding through quite a bit so for the sake of time, and felt like I was, hey, I had things nice and squared away in my life. Everything's good. I'm reading my Bible every day. I'm checking the boxes of being a good Christian. And I felt like I got this in hand. And then I was injured in training before I ever hit the streets, tore the IT band on my left side. It's a muscle that runs from your hip to your knee on the side of your leg. And so I was in crutches for a while, and that kind of was not ideal. But started off in law enforcement on night shift patrol, day shift patrol, traffic homicide, criminal investigator, crisis negotiator, intelligence liaison, analyst, all this stuff. And I don't have, I've got some memories of different really disturbing for some call, but the one that was the pivot point was in January of 2013 in a county just north of us that involved a little 5-year-old boy who was taken hostage on a school bus. And I was nothing special, not in charge, not like literally nothing, but it impacted me. This guy went onto a school bus and demanded the bus driver, whose name was Charles or Chuck Poland, and the bus driver refused. So the bad guy shoots and kills the bus driver and grabs the first boy off the bus. There was a 5-year-old boy named Ethan at the time. And so my job as part of the negotiator team was to, after this is hours later, was to sit in the mobile command post, and watch the video, listen to the audio, and pass that along to my supervisor, who'd pass along up the chain. And that determined actions or whatever. And so I'd sit and watch and listen and see this little boy. So long story short, I wake up and I've got my entire side of the bed is drenched in sweat, and I'm having horrible nightmares. This lasted a week. This case lasted 1 week, and it concluded as well as it possibly could have, with the bad guy being eliminated, the little boy saved, and no good guys were hurt, which by itself is a miracle. And I started drinking shortly thereafter, and I mean, not like I'll have a glass of wine now, I don't have a problem having a glass of wine, but then I was drinking a bottle of whiskey. For some, this won't make sense, but for some it will. I was drinking to feel the right things and drinking to numb the wrong things, and that plan does not work. I'll go ahead and tell you that approach is completely ineffective, and I don't boast in that at all. I laugh now because I see how the enemy tried to destroy me, and I see how the hand of my Redeemer has delivered me. And so I started drinking pretty heavy. That led, again, fast forwarding to me separating from my wife, my best friend, and our kids, and living in a portable storage building. And on a Sunday morning, at the end of my rope, feeling hopeless and just overcome with despair, really. Tired of fighting and tired of hurting. Put my sidearm to my head, and before I pulled the trigger, I yelled at God. And I said, I don't know where you are, if you can hear me, but if you have a plan for my life, you can have it. Otherwise, I'm tired of hurting and I'm tired of fighting. And he met me right there in that patrol car. There's absolutely, unequivocally, no other explanation than it was the presence of a living God in an absolute divine encounter that spared me. And I felt a peace that I have never been able to duplicate. You can only have it when you have an experience and encounter it with a living God. There's no drug, there's no substance, there's nothing in this world that can duplicate this. There's a lot of counterfeits, but they come at a consequence. And in that moment, this raging storm, in a split second, that raging storm immediately ceased. And I felt an embrace of a perfect love that I say is like 10,000 times greater than the embrace of my wife, which is the most perfect love on this planet I've known, or the embrace of my kids. And it brought tears running down the face of a man who had been stoic at best, cynical at worst, and cold hearted altogether. And I had an instant a desire to fight and a will to live again. And I went and found my wife that afternoon and told her what had happened. And she looked up at me and she said, "Babe, just come home." And God did a work in our marriage. And so instead of drinking every night, I wasn't writing anything organized. I was just dumping my thoughts out from that particular shift. And that led to me writing my first book, self publishing it. And then a year or so later, got the deal for Behind the Badge, which is now an award winning devotion for law enforcement. More than 100,000 copies sold, and then Bulletproof Marriage. And here we are. I'm fast forwarding like really fast with Bulletproof Family. This is my 10th book, nearly 300,000 copies sold, more than 1 million lives impacted. And that all started with a yes, an act of obedience to my father. I need Jesus more today than I needed him when I began. I have a tough time navigating a lot of the things of this world, but I know that if I take the next step in what he wants me to do, we're good. Just take the next step. On the radar for career day in high school, I thought that I really didn't know what I was going to be, but my dream in high school was to be a Marine. I wanted to join the Marine Corps, infantry, go to college, become a lawyer, and retire as a lawyer. That's what I wanted to do. And here we are, a former cop who writes books and travels and speaks. And I've helped a bunch of authors do the same thing, but that's my story in a nutshell. Once a man who was very sick, and I don't use what happened to me as an excuse to cover for things I did, unfaithful to God, my wife, my family, an alcoholic, an addict. I don't make excuses. I've owned it, but I also relinquished all that to my father who paid the price for it. And I still am a work in progress. I am nowhere near as much like Jesus as I should be. I jokingly say I'm more like Peter in the garden. I'll cut your ear off and let Jesus deal with the consequences. But I'm a work in progress. And my whole purpose is to love him with all my being, love my neighbor, and to demonstrate that by serving. And everybody serves differently. I used to tear people down with my words, and now I spend my days trying to find ways to encourage others, because that's the greatest gift we got, is to encourage others. If you don't have a single dollar or material thing to offer, you've got encouragement. You can encourage someone today and lift them up. You never know what people are going through, because the very first question, I wore a mask. And there's a lot of people that wear masks that are going through hard times.
So many people. And, just coming out of the gate when you were starting to tell your story about being a police officer, I'm thinking that's God's way of working through you to try to protect others from the things that happened to you. It was
Yeah.
almost like it was ordained. Your time was ordained. And so I think that's so wonderful that you served all those years and you've helped all those people. And I thank you for that. Thank you for your time in that. And now God has shifted you into something where You are walking out your great commission for the Lord. So thank you for what you're doing. God bless you in this. I just, before we close, I was just wondering if what is one thing the viewer can do today to lean into Jesus?
To sit and meditate and dwell on his goodness, on his love, to sit down and say, thank you. Thank you for who you are. Thank you for loving me. And then just be still. Pray this. Say, dear Jesus, remind me of your presence today. And then don't say a word. Just focus on that name. Focus on him. Spend time. What if we never had to pray for something for ourselves ever again because someone else was covering us and we were covering someone else? So I would challenge you today to go and sit in prayer. And instead of saying, God, I need money, or I need healing, or I need this, say, thank you for providing everything I need. Thank you for meeting the needs, the power bill, the car payment, the house payment, the insurance. Thank you for healing my back or whatever it is, whatever ailment you have, whatever affliction you're dealing with. Thank you, Father, for protecting me in the tornadoes last week. Thank you for covering me and for protecting my property. Thank you for whatever it is. Thank him like it's already done. And then spend time declaring his holiness and his goodness and his righteousness. Lift up his name. You see, our greatest pain doesn't come from the circumstances we're enduring at the moment. It comes from how we focus on them. And just like Peter, who had been called out of the boat, walked on water and got close to Jesus and began to sink and began to drown. It was his focus on the circumstances instead of the Redeemer in front of him. And so I would say the greatest thing you can do today is to shift your focus from the circumstances that stress you out or cause you some pain. And I don't say that to demean or discount anything you're going through. I'm familiar with hardship and adversity in my own life. And I will say that the greatest thing I did was shift my focus from the stuff around me to the eyes of Jesus, to sit in his presence and to seek his face. And the answer to the hardship will come, and you will endure because he will sustain you when you lean into him.